Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the course of Survey of Major English-Speaking Countries. This lecture is about the British Hadrian's Wall and the Great Wall of China. Hadrian's Wall is the remains of stone fortifications built by the Roman Empire following its conquest of Britain in the 2nd century AD. The original structure stretched more than 70 miles across the North English countryside, from the River Tyne near the city of Newcastle and the North Sea, west to the Irish Sea. Hadrian's Wall included a number of forts, as well as a ditch designed to protect against invading troops. The remnants of a stone wall are still visible in many places. Contrary to popular belief, Hadrian's Wall does not, nor has it ever, served as the border between England and Scotland, two of the 4 countries that make up the United Kingdom. However, it does hold significance as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a major tourist attraction. The Romans first attempted to invade the island, now known as Britain, in 55 BC, while under the rule of Emperor Julius Caesar. Although Caesar's military maneuver was unsuccessful, the armies of the Roman Empire again made a move to conquer the island, which was populated and governed by various Celtic tribes, at the order of Emperor Claudius in 43 AD. Claudius sent 24,000 soldiers to Britain, and by 79 AD, they had gained control of territory that now makes up Wales and southern England. However, they were still meeting fierce resistance from Celtic warriors in what is now northern England. The Romans desperately wanted the region now known as Scotland to be part of their growing empire. However, the Scottish fighters fought steadfastly. Many of them fled into the hills and remained stubborn opponents of the Romans, mounting numerous attacks on the northern outposts of the empire. By the time Emperor Hadrian came to power in 117 AD, the Romans no longer sought to expand their territory. Instead, they wanted to protect what they had. Under Hadrian's orders, the Roman governors of Britain began building the wall that would later be named for the emperor to defend the part of Britain they controlled from attack. In Hadrian's words, they wanted to separate Romans from the barbarians to the north. Scholars today believe that wall may have also served as a means of restricting immigration and smuggling into and out of Roman territory. As first planned, most of the wall was to be built in stone, but the eastern 30-mile section was in turf. In front of both was a substantial ditch, except where cracks or rivers made this unnecessary. At each mile, a gate was protected by a small guard post called a mile castle. Between each pair of mile castles lay 2 towers, creating a pattern of observation points every third of a mile. The stone wall, with a maximum height of about 15 feet, was 10 Roman feet wide enough for there to have been a walkway along the top. The turf sector was 20 Roman feet wide. Hadrian's Wall was built by the army of Britain, as many inscriptions demonstrate. The 3 legions of regular, trained troops in Britain, each consisting of about 5,000 heavily armed infantrymen, providing the main body of men building the wall. The complex building program took many years to complete. It is possible that it started before Hadrian's arrival in Britain in 122 AD. Although mainly built by legionaries, the wall was manned by auxiliaries. They were organized into regiments either 500 or 1,000 strong, and either infantry or cavalry or both. The 500-strong mixed infantry and cavalry unit was the workhorse of the frontier. Each fort on the wall appears to have been built to hold a single auxiliary unit. The troops based in the forts and mile castles of the war were mostly recruited from the northwestern provinces of the Roman Empire. In the early 2nd or early 3rd century, many mile castles had their north gates narrowed so that they could only be used by pedestrian traffic, while a major repair to the wall itself took place. The forts on the Hadrian Wall had a long life of nearly 300 years. Many modifications took place to the barrack blocks, the headquarters buildings, and the commander's house in particular. Some forts became overcrowded with buildings. Others acquired open spaces. So far as we can determine, all continued to the end of Roman Britain, that is, into the early 5th century. With the abandonment of Britain by the central authorities of Roman Empire, it is less clear what happened. In the years that followed, Hadrian's Wall became a quarry for the stones to build castles and churches, farms and houses along its line, until the conservation movement in the 18th and the 19th century put a stop to that. It was only from the mid-19th century onwards that early archaeologists and historians began to study Hadrian's Wall and sought to protect its still magnificent remains. A significant portion of the wall still stands and can be followed on foot along the adjoining Hadrian's Wall Pass. The largest Roman archaeological feature in Britain, it runs a total of 73 miles, that is 117.5 kilometers in northern England. Regarded as Britain's cultural icon, Hadrian's Wall is one of Britain's major Asian tourist attractions. It is a common misconception that Hadrian's Wall marks the boundary between England and Scotland. In fact, Hadrian's Wall lies entirely within England and has never formed the Anglo-Scottish border. On the east part of the world, there stands another even more famous wall, the Great Wall, which is a China icon. It shows us not only China's cultural national pride, grand projects, and a determined resistance, but also China's extravagant architecture and creativity. The Great Wall of China is an ancient series of walls and fortifications, totaling more than 13,000 miles in length, located in northern China. Perhaps the most recognizable symbol of China and its long, vivid history. The Great Wall was originally conceived by Emperor Qin Shi Huang in the 3rd century BC as a means of preventing incursions from barbarian tribes. The best known and best preserved section of the Great Wall was built in the 14th through 17th century AD during the Ming Dynasty. Though the Great Wall hardly effectively prevented invaders from entering China, it came to function as a powerful symbol of Chinese civilization's enduring strength. Though the beginning of the Great Wall of China can be traced to the 5th century BC, many of the fortifications included in the wall date back hundreds of years earlier, when China was divided into a number of individual kingdoms during the so-called Warring States period. Around 220 BC, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China under the Qing dynasty, ordered the earlier fortifications between states be removed and a number of existing walls along the northern border be joined into a single system that would extend for more than 10,000 li. A li is about 1/3 of a mile, and to protect China against attacks from the north. Constructions of the Wanli长城, or 10,000 li long wall, was one of the most ambitious building projects ever undertaken by any civilization. The famous Chinese general Meng Tian initially directed the project, and was said to have used a massive army of soldiers, convicts, and commoners as workers. Made mostly of earth and stone, the wall stretched from the China seaport of Shanhaiguan over 3,000 miles west into Gansu province. In some strategic areas, sections of the wall overlapped for maximum security. From a base of 15 to 50 feet, the Great Wall rose some 15 to 30 feet high and was topped by ramparts 12 feet or higher. Guard towers were distributed at intervals along it. Despite its long history, the Great Wall of China, as it exists today, was constructed mainly during the mighty Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644. Like the Mongols, the early Ming rulers had little interest in building border fortifications, and wall building was limited before the late 15th century. In 1421, the Ming Emperor Yongle proclaimed China's new capital, Beijing, on the site of the former Mongol city of Dadu. Under the strong hand of Ming rulers, Chinese culture flourished, and the period saw an immense amount of constructions in addition to the Great Wall, including bridges, temples, and pagodas. The construction of the Great Wall, as it is known today, began around 1474. After the initial phase of territorial expansion, the Ming Wall extended from the Yalu River in Liaoning province to the eastern bank of the Taolai River in Gansu province, and winded its way from east to west through today's Liaoning, Hebei, Tianjin, Beijing, Inner Mongolia, Shanxi, Shanxi, Ningxia, and Gansu. Starting west of Juyong Pass, the Great Wall was split into south and north lines, respectively named the inner and outer walls. Strategic passes, fortresses, and gates were placed along the wall. The Juyong, Juyongguan, Daoma, Daomaguan, and the Zijing passes, Zijingguan, closest to Beijing, were named the three inner passes, while further west were Yanmen, Yanmenguan, Ningwu, Ningwuguan, and the Piantou, Piantouguan, the three outer passes. All six passes were heavily garrisoned during the Ming period and considered vital to the defense of the capital. In the mid-17th century, the Manchus from the central and the southern Manchu area broke through the Great Wall and encroached on Beijing, eventually forcing the fall of Ming Dynasty and the beginning of the Qing Dynasty. Between the 18th and the 20th centuries, the Great Wall emerged as the most common emblem of China for the Western world, and a symbol, both physical, as a manifestation of Chinese strength, and a psychological representation of the barrier to resist foreign influences and protect its citizens. Today, the Great Wall is generally recognized as one of the most impressive architectural feats in human history. In 1987, UNESCO designated the Great Wall a World Heritage Site, and a popular claim that emerged in the 20th century holds that it is the only man-made structure that is visible from the space. Over the years, roadways have been cut through the wall in various points, and many sections have deteriorated after centuries of neglect. The best-known section of the Great Wall of China, Badaling, located northwest of Beijing, was rebuilt in the late 1950s and attracts thousands of national and international tourists every day. In recent years, an activity named Illuminating Hadrian's Wall was organized by the British Heritage Institutions. It is a public event on Hadrian's Wall, which took place on March, and saw the roots of the wall lit with beacons. This activity coincided with the 1600th anniversary of the end of the Roman rule in Britain, and was joined by a large number of British citizens, including students from all levels. Last year, students from British middle schools visited Hebei province and had a better learn about the Great Wall. The students, both from British middle schools and the local Chinese schools, held Illuminating the Great Wall of China, which would definitely promote the friendship among the young and the mutual understandings in history and culture. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.